For this video, we're going to be taking a look at a deck that I've had a lot of success with lately, but I didn't make a deck guide on it because I thought it was going to get kind of butchered by the most recent balance patch, and it turns out Rekindler was the only card touched. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think that the +1 mana cost on Rekindler really hurts this deck that much, and you'll see why as we go through it, but it basically remains the same, and I'm having a lot of fun playing this list. It's just very satisfying. All right, so the premise is to play as many copies of Anivia as possible and then just kind of win with your inevitability. Now, this is a control list. It's Shadow Isles and Freljord, and we're going to go through all of the cards, kind of talk about inclusions, though a lot of them are going to make sense just kind of at face value. So, Brittle Steel, this is a stall tool. It does also combine really nicely with cards like Rimefang Wolf that I'm currently on a 2 of, and we'll talk about that in a little minute. Yeah, Brittle Steel, it's just a stall tool for early game. We're a control deck, gives us favorable trades, makes us not take damage. We like those things. Hapless Aristocrat is here as a potential blocker. It's also a great sacrificial lamb for cards like Glimpse Beyond here. The spiders that it leaves behind can sometimes get buffed by Frenzied Skitterer for trading up, things like that. But again, stall tool. Sentry, stall tool, draw a card. Again, really straightforward. Glimpse, this is to allow you to kind of draw through your deck, make sure your hand is nice and plump, right? You've always got a cornucopia of options available, and you utilize it on some of these early game stall tools. Iceveil Archer, same premise. This is in here because it stalls really well, but also has that 3 attack, so early game it's one of your best ways to answer fearsome units. Vile Feast, more stall, more spiders. Frenzied Skitterer. This card is one of the cards I thought was going to get adjusted. Just straight up honest, I think this card is insanely good right now, and it's going to continue to be insanely good. It's great on the defensive rounds. It can be actually pretty impactful on offensive rounds if you've just accidentally acquired 2 or 3 other spiders. It's just all around solid. Mist's Call. This is a 1 of right now. We're not a Karma list, so we don't have a lot of great ways to abuse this, and we'd like to fit in more, but all of the things we really want to revive don't come down until far later into the game, and then once we're into the late game, the stuff that we kind of want to bring back, it's interesting because there are some really powerful things you can hit, but you don't want your hand clogged with this. I've ran multiple copies, and it starts to get clunky and not great in the early game if you draw multiples. So I'm currently at 1. Rimefang Wolf, I'm currently at 2 of. Sometimes this goes up to 3. Sometimes it's out entirely. But right now, you've got enough of the frostbite effects that you can get some pretty good value out of it. You've also got cards like Withering Whale that you can, maybe change out. Right now, I've got the 1 whale along with the avalanches. And a lot of that's just because I want a lot of board-wide effects, because that's what Anivia excels at. We'll talk a bit about that some more, but Rimefang right now is a 2 of. I could see this going up or down in terms of, potential costs. Avalanche, this just helps you early game versus aggro. Grasp is here largely because you need some kind of spot removal, but also because of the drain. We don't have many lifesteal units in this deck, and by many I mean any. We're not running Soul Gorger. We don't have those tools. So your actual life gain comes from drain in the form of Grasp, Vile Feast, and then the Withering Whale, which is another reason why I'm still running the 1 of there. Thresh. Okay, now we're into the good stuff, right? You might have noticed there's a lot of ways for us to either kill opposing units or just stall by killing our own. Thresh here with the 3/6 body and Challenger is another great way for you to remove opposing threats. And then as you chump block your way to the late game, it's going to become actually pretty easy to level up Thresh. And once Thresh has been leveled up, the first time they attack, they summon another attacking champion from your deck. So this is a great way for you to get a copy of Anivia out. Now, when this happens, you already have one Anivia on the board, it will still grab a second copy. This deck is all about getting multiple copies of Anivia onto the board. Sometimes you can get as many as 3 or 4, but even just 2 is brutal once you get to the enlightened portion of the game. Thresh is a way to allow you to do that. Now, that being said, you don't have to go all in the mid game trying to level Thresh. You'd like to level Thresh up, but you really don't need Thresh to have leveled until like around round 9-ish, because you ultimately want to be getting that second Anivia out when you're about to kind of finish the game off, or at least create a board state where you're likely... You can create board states where it's almost impossible for you to lose. I'll put it that way. All right, one Withering Wail. Again, it heals. So one of the reasons that Avalanche and Withering Wail are so good in this deck is because of Anivia, right? So Anivia on attack deals 1 damage to all enemies. The Enlightened version deals 2 damage to all enemies. Now, when you start combining that with additional effects, there have been times, for example, where I've actually ran more than 1 copy of Withering Wails, because it means that you can effectively clear your opponent's board over and over and over again. And that's also why it's so important that you try to get to the second Anivia, because when round 10 rolls around and you have 2 enlightened birds, it is the Alfred Hitchcock scenario, right? Like, you are just terrifying your opponent with birds, because 4 damage to the entire board and a guaranteed 4 damage to the Nexus, unless they, theoretically they could use Deny to stop one of the attack effects, right? Because it is a skill effect. But the reality is you're doing 4 damage to the Nexus and 4 damage to their entire board if you have 2 Anivias. And if you go up from there, then things just go out of control. You're getting single-sided board wipes. You've got to kill each of the Anivias not once but twice, which means that you've likely got to have a karma in play, and then you've got to have something that's going to resolve and then resolve again. So usually the way that you get stopped, so the thing that you want to watch out for that might hurt you, the thing you don't want to overcommit into, is karma that's also enlightened into ruination. They're going to lose their karma, but them losing their karma isn't really as devastating as you losing all of your Anivias to being killed twice. And so if they play a ruination, it kills the entire board, your eggs come up, and then the second one resolves and kills your eggs. That's what you kind of got to look out for and play around. So, don't go all in. You just want to get enough Anivias on the board, which again, usually the magic number is 2, so that you're threatening killing most of, if not the entire opponent's board every time you attack. So the reason 2 is a big deal, again, is that you hit that 4 number, so you're killing karmas unless they do something, and then you can just continue to do it over and over. If they pop that ruination combo, then you answer back with just creating another chain of Anivias, hopefully with what you stored up in your hand in that matchup. But yeah, Anivia combined with some of these other tools can help you kind of get over that initial hump, right? A lot of times by the time that Anivia is hitting Enlightened, they might have a pretty sizable board, right? They might have some 5/5s, some 6/6s, and so even getting to the magic number of 2 might not fully wipe the board. And so a card like Avalanche or a card like Withering Wail might be enough to just kind of put you over the hump for that first attack to make sure you've wiped the slate clean, and then you're kind of in control for the rest of the game. So Rekindler. This used to cost 6, it now costs 7, but since our entire desire, our entire game plan with this deck is to just make a bunch of Anivias, this costing 7 isn't really that big of a deal, because the main thing that we want to be bringing back costs 7. So other than, yeah, it means that in later turns you can't play Rekindler and then other cards in the same kind of like combination and capacity that you used to, in terms of like your on-curve usage, your on-curve play. The likelihood that this hurts you is pretty slim. In fact, the only time that it would really come up is if you've played Thresh on 5 and then Thresh dies and you really want to get a Thresh back on 6, you can't anymore. But outside of that really specific scenario, in most other cases, again, not really going to impact you. The real impact, as I said just moments ago, is the kind of combination and capacity of how you play other cards with it. One of the interesting things about nerfing costs in Legends of Runeterra just in general that I think might be overlooked, right, that I think most players might miss, is spell mana, right? Something costing 1 more doesn't just mean that it comes down a turn later. It does, and you have to factor that in, but in the later turns after you would have played it, right? So in every turn after turn 6 where you might be considering to play a Rekindler, by the card costing 1 more, it's 1 less spell mana you bank as well. The increase in cost in this game has ripple effects that I think are often ignored, and I think it's a little bit bigger of a deal in a game like this because of spell mana, right? It's really difficult to exactly gauge the impact that a change like 1 mana increase in cost is going to have for certain cards, but just know that it's a bigger deal than it probably looks like on the surface. That being said, I still don't think it's as big of an impact with this particular deck, just because we're not trying to really resurrect things that come down early. I think that, for example, the increase in the cost of Rekindler is going to impact Hecarim and Elise-based decks a bit more. One, because Hecarim got adjusted this patch, but also because there was a strong chance that had you not found your Hecarim to play on turn 6, Rekindler bringing back Elise was still a really powerful play on 6. So delaying that potential play even a turn longer in a deck that wants to be proactive is a big deal, but in this deck, not as big of a deal. Does hurt your spell mana, does hurt your ability, you know, in your Enlightened rounds to play Rekindler and other things a bit. But for the most part, the deck stays the same. And as always, now that I've talked through it and I've beaten this horse to death, so much so that it's probably an undead horse a la Hecarim at this point, we're going to go play a game so you can see the deck in action, get a feel for what you're supposed to do with the deck, and we'll do that now. So we are diving into a game, and we're going to be up against the new Callista that I'm a huge fan of. I am almost certain that I'm going to be featuring some decks with her. But right now, we'll keep the 1 Skitterer. We'd like to find something for our first couple of turns. Thresh is good. Skitterer is good. So we'll try this. So I'm excited to see how this matchup goes. Today's video is going to be coming out a bit later than normal for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to wait till the patch came out so I could record with proper costs. But also, streaming and making YouTube content and everything has been abysmal for like the last 3 or 4 days. Largely because my internet has been having issues. See, that's a really good Callista there. And not only has my internet been having issues, but I think it's largely because everybody is isolated due to the coronavirus at the time of recording this. And so my upload speeds have been pretty drastically hindered. It's made it very hard to make relevant content. I think it's because everybody's home. Wow, okay. So, interesting. I think we actually just pass here. It's very rare that our hand gets this clumped up, so we'll see if we can actually recover while we record to show the deck off. Traditionally, you don't want a hand to look like this. I mean, you want a Thresh, but you don't want 3. And honestly, the multiple Anivias is a bit of a hindrance at the moment. So when this happens, you're usually looking to play one Anivia kind of early, or as early as you can get away with, and then follow that up by playing the other one as a Harsh Winds, because you want to shuffle them back in when your Thresh goes to attack. Alright, so here we're going to end up blocking the Skitterer, mostly because if they're running Mark of the Isles still, with the adjustment to that, it's only a +2, so they'd have to have Mark of the Isles and something. Also, if you take the 4, they could have at 4 mana, like double Vile Feast. So while we take 1 more damage by not jumping in front of that, we get to be a bit more relevant in this regard. Alright, so this archer is a pretty big deal.
A chill in the air.
That's a pretty big deal. We would absolutely love to eat that with our Thresh, if possible. A little curious. They were wanting to go with a spell there. Maybe they see this coming and they wanted to play Will of Ionia on our Thresh. We have no way to stop that at the moment. Alright. So we're gonna go like this. I assume we're gonna eat a Will of Ionia here.
Cannot escape. It's too late for you.
Oh, they want to black spear me, huh? Well, that's not very kind now, is it?
Every betrayal sharpens our resolve.
Save the homestead.
I mean, the good news is we have backup Threshes. Let's go ahead and... we're gonna pop this. Mostly, I want to drain, but I also want the spider on the board, and we're gonna be carrying over spell mana anyway. So I think this is fair. The brittle steel is nice. Alright, so there's a Hecker. So now we have to decide, what do we want to do? Rekindler does get us a Thresh, or we could just play Thresh. We could also just play our Anivia to set up a counter attack for the following turn. And then if our Anivia does happen to die, we can get an early Rekindler copy. And I think that's what we're going to do.
The spirit of winter.
The reason this is relatively safe is because we know that Thresh is going to make the 2/2s. But we can comfortably block that. This only needs one more unit to die before it's leveled up, and at that point it does become a bit of a pain. But there's nothing we can really do to stop it. Like, we can frostbite one of these, but they're still going to die at the end of the turn regardless. These will die post-combat, so if we block with this, they could then try to Black Spear the egg. So that's something to consider as well.
Endure.
Please, I have connections.
So I think we're going to do it like this.
They must all pay the
Again, we're in a bit of an awkward spot just because our hand has been as clunky as possible. Another Rekindler. Wow, we're just all power.
The die curse your name above all others, Thresh.
Alright. That's, you know, moderately annoying, but still not the end of the world. We're still going to try to get rid of Callista because of the annoyance that she is. So things that we're worrying about, like post-attack, would be, again, Black Spear or
World in perfect state.
Double Vile Feast, you know, things that are going to kill our Anivia egg. I would have considered maybe not even attacking with the Anivia. However, we really needed to get rid of Callista, so we needed the 1 extra damage, and we also do have double Rekindler. So there's Vile Feast number 1. Here comes Vile Feast number 2. But now at this point, we absolutely are going to play this box because that will level up our Thresh, which is really important. Wow, or not. Or we're just going to get denied. Fair enough. I see your play and I respect it. Only 1 Anivia left in the deck for our Thresh as defined. Never mind, there are 0 Anivias left in the deck. So we've got to get them back in the deck. I mean, at this point, we just need blockers more than anything.
1 candle for every sun.
And apparently, even though I've turned off notifications, they're still going to come through. This one has seen the most units die, so we want to be most protective of that one.
Such naivete.
We're going to go with something like this. So yeah, awkward because we have to play 1 Anivia, and then before we can even get the benefit of Thresh pulling 1 from our deck, we have to Harsh Winds with the other one. So I'm not sure that's going to be a thing. And our Rekindlers will, sadly, at the moment, only pull Threshes from the grave, which again is not the end of the world. It's still a lot of value, but with our game plan to be multiple Anivias, our opponent, I was going to say, was doing a good job of preventing that, but I think they're just conceding to late game pressure. Very awkward hand. Like, I'm not going to lie, hands do not normally look like that. That's an anomaly, but I'm kind of happy that you got to see that outcome because it kind of shows what you can do even with a bad hand, right? Bad hands are not the end of the world. You've got a number of ways to stall the game out with this deck. So anyway, hopefully this helps you. Like I said before, I have a lot of fun playing this deck. It's been my best performing deck, I'd probably say, for the last week or so, which is a bit shocking. I'm doing better with this than I am even the Karma Control decks. And also, it's just a blast to play. So anyway, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll catch you watching future videos. If you're new, consider subscribing. It's free. You just have to push the button. Anyway, I love you all.